Sorry, I'm just stopping because I forgot to start recording the meeting. Thank you for that, Amanda. So we are recording the meeting. So we estimate that at least 1,500 pupils of compulsory school age are not in education. And that is a big problem. There's a £2 billion shortfall, as we've said, in the country. And in Tower Hamlets, we estimate that that amounts to a £12 million shortfall in funding needed for children with SEND. And we've been campaigning on this for over a year now. It was just a year ago we had a big public meeting in Oakland School. And just at the turn of the year, we delivered a petition signed by thousands of people to Downing Street to say that we need that money in our schools to support our children. The situation, unfortunately, we face now, and that we're going to discuss tonight, is that Tower Hamlets Council are proposing to cut money from the special needs service. What we'll talk to you about tonight is a service that is called the Support for Learning service, that provides specialist support for children in our schools, for visually impaired children, deaf and partially hearing children, and children with complex needs. Tower Hamlets is proposing to cut that budget by 650,000, and that means over 13 jobs will be lost from that service. 13 jobs of teachers and other staff who provide much needed support for children in our schools. So that's why we've called you to this meeting tonight, to ask you to join our campaign on that, to say to Tower Hamlets that you shouldn't be making this cut. It would be a bad cut to make at any time, but in the middle of a pandemic, which we know has affected some of the most vulnerable children in our schools worse than anybody else, is a particularly bad time to be making that cut. We're very pleased to be joined by Rachel Smith, our BSL interpreter. So if you need interpretation at the meeting, look for Rachel and she'll be signing for you. So with that, we've got a lineup of speakers. We're going to ask our speakers to speak for about 3 minutes each. 3 to 4 minutes each, so to give you a sense of the range of people we've got here. We've got parents, teachers, campaigners, and others. MPs and our councillors are here as well. So first of all, I'm going to ask Alison Wagner, who is the NEU rep at the Support for Learning service, to tell us a little bit about the service and what the cut may mean.
Thank you very much, Alex. Yes, so Alison Wagner, teacher of the deaf, as well as the one of the NEU reps at the Support for Learning service. So I want this evening just to outline briefly the situation regarding the proposed cuts to the service, talk about some of the implications of those cuts, but I'm very conscious that this meeting needs to be a call to action and we need to take forward our campaign. So currently the councillor are consulting with staff and stakeholders about a restructure of the Support for Learning service. Now, the proposals will mean drastic cuts to staffing, as Alex just outlined there. So the headline figure really is that there's going to be a 50% cut to staff working in the teams across that service. So that's the deaf partially hearing team, the vision impairment team, the language and communication team, the specific learning difficulties team. There will also be some deletion of posts, so key posts, for example, the manager of the vision impairment team, who's here this evening, the manager of the deaf and partially hearing team, who is also here this evening. So we've been told what the reasons for these deep cuts are: a squeeze on budgets, and we know how difficult this is for the council. There's been a lot of children within the borough who have been diagnosed with autism, and there's been an increase in the number of school places for children with autism. There's been pressure from head teachers to reduce the amount of money from the high needs funding budget, which funds the Support for Learning service. But we do not want to see a situation where we are robbing Peter to pay Paul, where we're taking money from one budget to put into another budget, because that always means that children will lose out. There's a squeeze on the council budget by central government, as Alex said. This is an ongoing national campaign to improve SEND funding. We heard the Cabinet Member for Children and Schools for Tower Hamlets, Councillor Danny Hassel, talk publicly and passionately last year at the public meeting we held about the SEND cuts. So we know what the difficult situation is for Tower Hamlets Council. But let's just dig down a little bit into those figures. 3 qualified teachers of the deaf, a reduction down from 6, a reduction of, well, over 6, a reduction of over 50%. 3 qualified teachers of the deaf will be left in the borough to cover early years. That includes babies with a new diagnosis of a hearing loss at home, preschools, nurseries, primary schools, secondary schools, the specialist schools. We cover all those areas in our roles. 2 qualified teachers of the vision impaired to again cover all those different areas. We have 486 children on our caseload in the
3
deaf,
minutes, Alison.
partially hearing team, and there are 246 children on the caseload of the vision impairment team. So Tower Hamlets is a success story in terms of inclusion for children with SEND. 97% of children with a diagnosis of vision or hearing loss, 90% are educated within our borough. I'm proud to work for the service. It's a service that's highly regarded, but the proposed cuts will jeopardise the successes that we have had for inclusion in this borough. Thank you.
Thanks, Alison. Thanks very much for that. A good outline of what we face. Our next speaker is going to be Emma Parker, who has been campaigning nationally through an organisation called SEND Crisis. Emma, if you can unmute yourself.
Thanks, Alex. 2 years ago this week, my son went to the DFE and delivered a petition demanding more money for SEND. A year ago, SEND Crisis had rallies across 20 cities, and my son went Downing Street and delivered another petition. This crisis is only going to get worse. We have more and more children who are getting EHCPs and who are having diagnoses, and the impact it has is horrendous. The LGA says that there is a 1.6 billion deficit in SEND. I'm up in sunny Durham at the moment. Our local authority has a 5.8 billion deficit. So we absolutely feel the pain of Tower Hamlets. We need our specialist teachers more than ever. We have very few school places available at the moment, which means we need that specific and tailored support within our schools. Our children need better than this. Every child deserves to thrive, and we need to stand up for all of the children across the UK. Each county has their own kind of issues around funding, but I mean, we've spoken to parents, we've spoken to local authorities, and the picture is bleak across the board. You know, we need funding now, and we need it in all of our schools. I'm going to finish with that.
Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us from Durham and being part of all the work you've done on part of the national campaign. Now we're going to hear from a couple of parents. Our first parent is Annika, who will introduce yourself, but I'm told she's a parent of a deaf child in a Tower Hamlets school. Yeah. Annika, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yep, I have. Thank you, Alex. So yeah, my daughter was born and raised in Tower Hamlets, and Alison was one of the team that we initially met. We've been fortunate to have, like Alison said, the successes, because we've had the most outstanding support from literally hearing aids at 11 weeks. She's now 7.5. My fear is, though, that moving forward, all of the good work and all of the effort and support and advice and sign language that we've learned is going to be lost, because Elise is one of those children that doesn't have an EHCP. So my fear is that, like Alison said, the money's just being, you know, robbing Peter to pay Paul, so that more funds are given to autistic children, which of course they need. But where's Elise equality in this? And that's the fight that I need to stand up for Elise and all the children with no EHCP, that have got no legal rights, that has had so much amazing input, has now moved school to an even better school, but those teachers aren't trained. She's the first deaf child in that school. So how are they expected to provide the support that a teacher of the deaf can do? They can't. It's impossible. So it's almost like everything that we've been given is now going to be robbed from us. So yeah, that's the crux of my argument. I can't rave enough about the team we've got in Tower Hamlets. They're all outstanding. We're so lucky. And given, like you've said, the increase year on year of children that need additional support, it doesn't make sense why they're taking money away, especially from skilled, experienced staff who families have worked with for years and years. You're not going to get that in other services. So I think we need to fight to have more invested rather than taken away. So yeah, I think that's my key message. Who's fighting for those children without an EHCP? So thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Annika. We always say in the NEU, when anyone is proposing to cut like this and cut services like this, if you lose it, you will never get it back, you know, and that's why we want to fight to keep this service. I should say that in evaluation that was done of how schools coped during the lockdown, during the pandemic, one of the highlights of the report was the support given by the Support for Learning Service, that families said they really felt valued and well supported by this service that is now facing a cut. So we really welcome your contribution, Annika. So our next speaker is another parent of a child with complex needs. Michelle, are you here?
I am. Good evening,
you are.
everyone.
You're welcome.
Just to give you an overview, my son does have complex needs. He has dystonic cerebral palsy and cortical vision impairment. And needless to say, I've probably had the most experience of all services within this borough. So I'm probably a perfect person to compare and you know, and compare each service, from OT, speech and language, physio, to the SLS team and visual impairment. And to say that the best support I have had, head and shoulders above other services in this borough, which is sad to say really, but it has been the SLS visual impairment team. Absolutely. I can't thank them enough from the bottom of my heart. I arrived in the borough when my son was 1 year of age. I was suffering with severe PTSD and anxiety, as a lot of parents will suffer with, or I'm finding out their child's got such high needs, first time parent. And the visual impairment team came to my house and from day one told me and showed me that you know, my son not having full vision will never define his life. And she showed me through modelling, consistent support week in or every other week, encouraging me to go out to a Dove support team, meeting other parents, because with my PTSD and anxiety, I was so afraid to go out. I didn't have the I didn't have the courage to do it. And this one person in particular, the VI support, has been consistent in all of my son's settings. I was looking through his books recently, and she's been from the home to Doves to playgroup and now to his school. And I'm still ringing on her, and we're having conversations about settling my son into school. Just been outstanding. Even I can speak as a professional. I was a teacher of 10 years and I've got a master's degree in children's development and learning, and that never qualified me to take on this role as a mother to my son Jacob. And I don't know how you're expecting teachers within a classroom to be specialists and support. You know, my son goes to mainstream and he's doing fantastic, but it's with the support from the visual impairment team. She has been that consistent person supporting teachers. upskilling them? Who is going to assess my son and manage his, show, support the teachers year on year to make sure he's accessing the curriculum? Who is, for instance, if he wanted to access Braille, who's going to Braille the curriculum for Jacob? Because, a teacher was unable to do that. His support staff is unable to do that. And I wouldn't expect them to anyway. They haven't got the time in the day. And this is where the specialism comes in, and it's so important.
3 minutes, so just Michelle.
Talking about diverting funds to EHCP plans. I know lots of parents need EHCP plans, but my son's had one, and he's not seen a speech and language therapist all year. And that's why the visual impairment team stand head and shoulders above, because she's in school supporting his communication through the use of his eyes. Who is going to support my son once she's gone? And this team's depleted. And don't tell me over a phone call to an advisory centre is going to be adequate enough support, because professionally and personally, I can tell you it isn't. I recently had an annual review yesterday, and guess who has to go in and support the teachers and helping them to understand my son's complex needs? Me. I've offered to go in and do a PowerPoint. That isn't my job. But this is it. There's no other professionals out there. And the visual impairment team have offered to support me in delivering that message on my son's complex needs, how we can meet them sufficiently and support him, and be inclusive, and the language all around that, and how we should work with parents, because actually there's no one else there to do that. And the best team in the borough, for me, you're depleting, and it's absolutely heartbreaking and frightening. And to say it's a disgrace, it really is. So thank you for listening to me, and you've got my full support.
Thank you, Michelle and Annika. And if you're at all moved by those testimonies from Michelle and Annika, we would urge you to take part in the public consultation that is going to start on November the 2nd. Tower Hamlets are launching a public consultation, and they will be having meetings and inviting responses to this proposal. And they tell us that they will listen to the consultation, and that the proposals may change as a result of the consultation. So the more people that respond, the more people that pick up what Annika and Michelle have been saying and respond, the better chance we've got of pushing back on these cuts. So we've heard from parents, and now we want to hear from 2 former students. The first is Iqbal Hassan. Iqbal,
thank you, Alex.
Are you here?
Yeah, thank you. So good evening, everyone. So firstly, I would like to say thank you to the chair and those who invited me here to share my speech. So my name is Iqbal Hassan, and I'm 20 years old. I have severe to profound hearing loss. I wear hearing aid in both ears. So I am proud to say that the Support for Learning service has supported me for over 14 years through my academic years. The support I received were in Overland Children's Centre, Culloden Primary School, and St Paul's Way Trust School. I have received fantastic support from the SLS, which involved ensuring that I had the right support with language and communication and equipment that worked well for me. It's unimaginable to think in the future a deaf child like me at school could be without a specialist teacher of the deaf to attend the school, assess their needs, and train and advise the staff how to support the child. This is disappointing to hear that children from April and onwards would not have the same support I had, as it assisted me so well that I had the opportunity to attend college and accomplish my goals. I am an undergraduate studying Bachelor of Arts, Graphic and Media Design at the University of the Arts, London. So I am due to graduate in July 2021. I am also pleased to say that in my second year, I have successfully achieved a first-class degree as an overall grade. I am also proud to say that my university is the second place in the world for the art and design by the 2020 QS World University Rankings. Getting here is all because of the support I received in my preschool, primary and secondary. And without that, I wouldn't be studying at university for a first-class degree. It is Tower Hamlets Teachers of the Deaf who motivated me to keep me going and made adjustment in my education in order to reach my full potential. I was devastated when I heard the news that the amount of TOD jobs is getting cut more than half. I love the SLS team and they are my heroes. And they were always there for me. No matter what, they would sort it out instantly. Without the support I received, I wouldn't be the person I am today. But I stand here to oppose this attack upon young children with special needs, family, and the SLS. Every child with special needs and disability deserves to be fully included as part of their human rights. So I say, Tower Hamlets Council, stop the cuts and support your children. Thank you for listening.
Iqbal, thank you so much for that. One of the problems with Zoom meetings is that you can't hear the applause that would be ringing out if we were actually meeting in person. It's so great to have you here. Thank you very much for what you've said. Right, our next speaker is another student, and we're doing this by video. So whilst I just set up a screen share, I'm going to ask Lorna Patterson to introduce the video of Sammy.
Okay, thanks, Alex. So, hi, I'm Lorna. I'm really proud to be the team leader for the Visual Impairment Service. We currently have about 250 children and young people on caseload of all ages, some with considerable complex needs and others who are typically developing and learning in mainstream settings alongside their sighted peers. We have 5.5 QTVIs, qualified teachers of the visually impaired, in our service, and we offer varied levels of support depending on the child's vision and also an assessment of their support needs. We have 15 children and young people who are either learning Braille or who have been identified as requiring to learn Braille in the future when they're a little bit older. This requires a high level of support from our team. Under the proposals, this team will be reduced from 5.5 teachers to just 2. This will inevitably lead to requests for placements in specialist schools in other boroughs as parents realise that their children's needs are not being met. I am really honoured to introduce our next speaker, who has made a short video to talk about the importance of specialist support in her educational journey. Sammy is an ex-student of ours. Last year, she was selected out of 15,000 students attending London and South East colleges to receive the Learner of the Year award, and she went to the Houses of Parliament to receive her award. She has just completed a Level 3 BTEC in Sports Science and has an unconditional offer from her first choice of university to study osteopathy. Sammy Begum.
Hi guys, I'm Sammy, and today I'm going to talk about how important support is for visually impaired people. So I was diagnosed around the age of 5 or 6. I started getting support around year 2 in primary school. So my support used to help me scribe, basically my one-to-one support. So, you know, whatever I needed, my support will help me with that. I also used to get VI specialist coming in to basically visit me, I think once a week, to teach me sort of Braille, and also like help me with like other tactile, maybe diagrams and stuff like that. I think around the age of 9, I started getting like mobility training. So someone used to come in and help me with like crossing roads and basically how to navigate around rooms, echolocation, stuff like that. I'm not good at it at all, but yeah, stuff like that. Transitioning from primary to secondary was quite hard. it helped a lot. The VI specialists that used to come in throughout primary school, I think in year 6, she used to take me to my potential secondary school and basically visit it like once a week and just work there for a few hours. That helped a lot. Shout out to Lorna. And obviously when I did transition to secondary school, so throughout secondary, I had specific sort of one-to-one support that works with me in classes. Without them, I probably would have not been fluent in my borough or basically be here right now. The one-to-one support used to obviously push me to use a lot more Braille because my sight was quite bad at that point where I had to use Braille. Also, you know, having someone there motivated me to carry on. Like, as a visually impaired person, I've realized we do quite have very low self-motivation. So having someone there helped quite a lot. Throughout secondary, I remember I used to have like one-to-one support after school. As you know, or I'm sure you know, visually impaired people do take longer to maybe finish a piece of work. And with like tactile diagrams and stuff like that, you need to practice. Obviously, people with sight can just see it, they're done. We have to, you know, learn how to navigate around like a graph or something like that. So it takes us longer. Shout out to the Morpeth plan. Anyway, so without these law, I probably would have not made it to Dorton College, and basically college in general.
Cool.
Great. That's it.
Hi guys, I'm Sammy.
Thank you, Lorna. Did you want to? That was wonderful, Lorna. Thank you for taking the time to set up that video. I think hearing from Iqbal and Sammy in that way just tells us how important this service is and how we can't afford to lose it. To hear from parents and children in that way is fantastic. So our next set of speakers, in a way, we're going to hear from some of the professionals now, and then we're going to finish off by hearing from some of the politicians who we hope will tell us what they can do to support our campaign. So our first person to speak in this section is Rachel Moitra, who's a speech and language therapist. Rachel, are you in the room? You are.
Thanks, Alex, and thanks to everybody who's spoken so far, and for inviting me to speak this evening. My name is Rachel. I'm the lead speech and language therapist in Tower Hamlets for deaf children, and I have worked in the borough for over 25 years, and it's my absolute pleasure and pride to work alongside the Support for Learning service jointly and collaboratively for all of that time. And I feel enormously proud of everything that we do together and achieve and continue to achieve. I want to talk to you this evening about the impact of these cuts in several ways. I'm first going to focus on the most important, which is the impact on the families, the young people and the children that these cuts will impact. These cuts are talking about taking away vital support that's there from the start and is a model of excellence at the moment, and leaving them with nothing to replace it. It's extremely cruel to do that to families, people, extremely cruel. And we do know, sadly, already what happens to deaf people if you don't support them from the start adequately. They are left behind, they aren't included, and their families struggle to cope. Why on earth are we talking about doing that to people? I really don't know why. We also know that the health service has to work collaboratively with education to plan and implement good care and achieve good outcomes. All of the documentation, all of the commissioning arrangements, all of the SEND code of practice says that these decisions and these approaches should be collaborative. Why on earth is Tower Hamlets Borough deciding to make a unilateral decision without consulting with its health partners about the impact of this decision. The health service is currently funding at a national level cochlear implants for children that are deaf, universal hearing screening programs, and very expensive hearing aids for these children, as well as probably very expensive appointments for children's eyes, for their vision, for their support. And how on earth are those people expected to make use of those appointments and equipment without support after that diagnosis or around those appointments? Is it expected that the existing health service are going to pick up the pieces and absorb that? Well, the health service is already on its knees. We are not able to absorb anything extra in the health service. So it won't be that there will be support absorbed by other services. It will just be that there is not adequate support, which makes no sense and is not joined up and is counter to all the policies and procedures that everybody says we ought to be using. The last thing I'm going to say is that actually this is not going to save any money. In the long run, it's actually going to cost the borough money. Because if you don't intervene early, if you don't provide the correct support, it ends up costing the borough more in out-of-borough placements and expensive wraparound support for families and children that are not coping. It makes no sense to take away services that are actually doing a great job of saving the borough money and make, in the long run, it cost the borough more money.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rachel, for that. That contribution, which I think just underlines the importance of this service. And we should say that people like Rachel and others have put in so many years service to Tower Hamlets. And whilst we're not particularly talking about this tonight, we have members, the NEU has members in the service who are facing redundancy or facing pay cuts as a result of this of these cuts, and that is something we are dealing with separate to the need to promote the needs of the service for the children. So our next contribution is from Michael Watkinson, who is a BSL instructor, and I think, Rachel, you are going to speak for him. Is that okay?
Yep, that's fine.
Can you see Michael?
Just about. It's a little bit blurry, but hopefully we'll be okay.
Right.
Hi, good evening, everybody. So my name is Michael Watkinson, and I'm a deaf instructor for British Sign Language. And yeah, I work with the team that deal with the deaf and hard of hearing students. And I was born in Tower Hamlets and grew up in Tower Hamlets myself, and I received support. And now I work in Tower Hamlets, and I'm incredibly proud of the service, of everything, of both what I received growing up and what is still in place. When I heard about this cuts and what a huge scale that the cuts are, I just couldn't believe it. It was heartbreaking. And when I think about, you know, in terms of like, you know, how that's going to affect deaf children and what I do in terms of the work that I do with deaf children and going out and teaching people and the contribution that I make, it's really valuable. This has a really big impact on people's lives. You know, there are many, many deaf children within Tower Hamlets. And there's a lot of work in terms of, you know, assessments and, you know, and also deafness isn't standardized as well. It's, you know, it's very wide ranging. So it's not like a one size fits all. So what you really need to do basically is, you know, have that assessment and that specialist package for each child to match their needs. And I just feel like with these cuts that all of that is going to be lost and you won't be able to put in place the same level of provision that's needed. And also, I think, you know, as was said previously, this is going to cause a lot more kind of dependence on other services. Families are going to struggle, and, you know, it's going to be impossible. Also, for example, with the kind of support that I provide in terms of British Sign Language and helping families so that they can communicate with their children, it's essential to have that in as early as possible. And you know, it takes a lot of time as well. It's not a quick fix. And if the funding isn't there and services can't continue to provide this, this is going to have huge long-term consequences. Children will have language deprivation, and, you know, there's a long-term impact. It has, you know, wide-reaching implications. And so I just, you know, for me, I've worked for 18 years in this profession, and I've seen so many children and, you know, people who have had a kind of happy ending in terms of what they've been able to achieve because of the support that's been in place. So I'm so worried what's going to happen to the children of the future if they don't have this support. It's frightening, it really is. So, you know, I really hope that, you know, in terms of the campaign, that we can make some impact and that they will have some changes in terms of the proposal, and that they won't proceed with these cuts. You know, I'm really proud of Tower Hamlets. You know, as I said, I grew up here, and I know that other deaf people in the local community are also really proud as well. And we want to be able to provide the same support to other deaf people in the borough that we received.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you,
very
Rachel,
much
for that. I think now is a good time, if I could ask you if you know how to show your appreciation using a clap sign at the bottom of the screen, or just wave at Rachel to thank her for supporting us tonight. It's been so good to have you here, Rachel. We really do appreciate it. Right, now we're going to have some poetry, I think. Is Raymond Antrobus here?
Yeah, I'm here. Hello, Alex.
There you go.
Hey. Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Raymond. I am a poet from Hackney. I grew up in Hackney. I started getting special educational support in school from around 7 years old when I went to London Field School. I'm deaf. I have 2 hearing aids. My parents didn't know I was deaf until I was older. So I had lots of support, including speech therapy. And I started learning sign language in my secondary school from 11 years old. But I just want to say how distraught and disturbed I am by this cut, by this proposal, that this could happen. I would not be where I am without the support that I got, and I got a lot of support. And they say that when you go in your time at school, there are teachers that you just will never forget. And most of the teachers that I have not forgotten since leaving school have actually been my support teachers. Penny Wiles, Miss Macassar, Miss Walker, there's so many teachers, and they've all been all support teachers. And just to say that I've published my first book of poems called The Perseverance, which is the name of a pub down Broadway Market. And in this book, I was sure at the beginning to acknowledge and thank all the special education that I received, and the special educational needs that I was the recipient of, to be able to go on to write books. My most recent book is in fact a children's picture book. It's called Can Bears Ski. This is out in America in a few weeks. The illustration is by a friend of mine called Polly Dunbar, who is also hard of hearing or deaf. And I know, I'm pretty proud of it. I just got this in the post today, so I'm actually just seeing it for the first time. And it tells a story based on what it was like for me growing up as a deaf child. My dad having lots of problems waking me up in the morning for school, and how they didn't know I was deaf. But actually it was his voice that would, his voice and the vibration and the feeling of his presence in the house, which would wake me up and spring me into action. So this is out here in the UK next month. So I just wanted to read one poem in honor of this, which is, I know that in deaf education, the illiteracy rate is so high. And again, I had two teachers, Miss Walker and Miss Picasso, who would stay with me after school, go over my homework, go over my reading. It was thought that I was dyslexic because I couldn't write in a straight line. So for me, when I think about where language began for me, it began with children's picture books. It began with being read to, and my dad had read me this story called Happy Birthday Moon. And it was a children's picture book about a bear that lives out in the forest, climbs the highest mountain or the highest hill, looks up at the moon and says, "It's my birthday." And the bear's voice echoes through the valley and the forest. And the bear hears his voice as an echo, "It's my birthday." And the bear looks up at the moon and thinks that the moon is talking to him. So he thinks that the moon also has the same birthday as him. And that book is called Happy Birthday Moon, which I love, and is inspired this and inspired the last poem in this book, which I am going to read to you now. It's a pantoum, so there are 2 lines that repeat, and throughout the book there are lots of poems use repetition, because when you are deaf in the hearing world or hard of hearing in the hearing world, you rely constantly on repetition, and that's something I've leaned into in poetry. So this is called Happy Birthday Moon. Dad reads aloud. I follow his finger across the page. Sometimes his finger moves past words tracing white space. He makes the moon say something new every night to his deaf son who slurs his speech. Sometimes his finger moves past words tracing white space. Tonight he gives the moon my name, but I can't say it. His deaf son who slurs his speech. Dad taps the page, says, "Try again." Tonight he gives the moon my name, but I can't say it. I say, "Reynan Akobok." He laughs. Dad taps the page, says, "Try again." But I like making him laugh. I say my mistake again. I say, "Reynan Akobok." He laughs, says, "Raymond, there's something else." I like making him laugh. I say my mistake again. "Reynan Akobok. What else will help us?" He says, "Raymond, there's something else. I'd like to be the moon, the bear, even the rain. Reynan Akobok. What else will help us hear each other, really hear each other? I'd like to be the moon, the bear, even the rain. Dad makes the moon say something new every night, and we hear each other, really hear each other. As Dad reads aloud, I follow his finger across the page. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much to all of the teachers, everyone that spoke. These cuts must not go ahead. And without campaigns like this, without teachers and students, without all these voices being raised, people like me would not be writing books and out in the community today. So thank you so much for listening, and thank you for fighting and being present.
Thank you, Raymond. Thank you so much for that. I hope, and I'm sure that if you're available, you'll get some invitations to come and speak in schools or perform your poetry and books in schools. As a result of that, that was truly beautiful. Right, so we're still aiming to finish at 7. We're moving on to what's a next section of speakers, which is, I suppose, what I could call some influencers, people who may be in a position to help us and speak up for what they've heard tonight on behalf of the students and parents that they've heard speaking tonight. And first of all, we're pleased that she's been able to join us, and she has to go back to vote soon in the House. One of our local MPs, Apsana Begum.
Thank you so much, Alex, and greetings to everybody on this call. I want to begin my remarks, I guess, by giving a quick update regarding the work of the Education Committee, which I serve on. We've met with the government and ministers in the government and Ofsted as well. We've grilled the Education Secretary about the Department for Education's response to the pandemic, raising concerns about disadvantaged groups, special educational needs, disabilities and school funding as well. Of course, locally, I am very concerned at the plans to cut the support for learning services for children with special educational needs by around a half. Very concerned about what this means for those who will be losing their jobs and the children who will be losing support. And of course, this is despite being well documented that children with SEND and their families continue to suffer disproportionately during the COVID-19 crisis, and that the SLS has provided critical work through the previous lockdown, supporting families and schools with resources, online and virtual teaching sessions, phone contact, British Sign Language groups, parent support groups, even stay and play sessions, the video work, the blogs, and so much more. As many of you will know, I've long supported local campaigns to protect nurseries and community language services. And, I was elected on a Labour platform that called for the restoration of Sure Start, ending schools becoming academies, abolishing tuition fees, and, the restoration of grants and, increased funding for adult education. So, I therefore continue to work and stand in solidarity with education workers and families. And this includes my ongoing work with local SEND campaigners to highlight just how Tower Hamlets schools and early intervention services in particular continue to face significant cuts. And parents of children with additional needs are already struggling to have children's learning needs met. Tower Hamlets, as we know, ranks as having one of the highest proportion of children in the country with SEND. We have long needed a national strategy to end the culture of, buck passing regarding the design and the funding of EHC plans. Now, last year, even before the pandemic and before I had the honour to serve on the Education Committee, the Parliament's Education Committee published a report calling for SEND reforms and highlighting the funding crisis. And to put it quite simply, look, the support for children at school with SEND is faltering. It is trapped in a vicious downward spiral. And as conservative school cuts and increased demand have overburdened the system, that's led to delays and indecision. And, obviously in the meantime, thousands of children miss out on assistance as they need. This is an absolute appalling way to be addressing the education of some of our most vulnerable children and young people. And, as we've heard, it's causing untold misery and worry for thousands of families, because as the support for our young people with special educational needs and disabilities crumbles under that strain of rising demand and then falling resources, more and more unacceptable strain is being placed on education workers, and children and families. These are young people who are among the most vulnerable of our fellow citizens, and families, have to continually fight for them. Why is it that over and over again, the most vulnerable children are paying the highest price for public sector cuts? It's totally unacceptable that diverse needs are struggling to be met. And this risks wasting potential and possibility by hindering the unique contribution to society that every individual can make. And we're looking at, we're hearing testimonies here today of how much contribution is being made, that unique contribution that's being made to our society, because of course education shapes future generations, and schools are vital institutions for communities around them, as well as the educational needs of our community's children. Services like the SLS can bring about those vital changes in the lives of people who otherwise might be overlooked. These are life-changing services. I'm in awe of the talent, courage and dedication of pupils with SEND and the professionals that they work with and their families. I remember being profoundly sort of moved at a local meeting last November, and the testimony of Iqbal, who's on this call today, who spoke about his experiences of the early years support with the specialist deaf unit at the now closed Overland Nursery. And he sung praises for the SLS service because it gave him that individual attention that he required throughout his education. And to now see him go on up to the prestigious University of the Arts to undertake a degree is actually a beautiful example of what has been achieved by this service. And I'm actually going to quote Iqbal, because I remember him sort of saying that every child deserves this support, and without the support he received, he would not be where he is now. And of course he's been devastated to learn about these cuts, but one thing that did stood out is when he said every child deserves this support. It's the human right, and that's what we've got to look at it as well. This is the human rights of people. And I will end there, and apologies if the bell rings and I have to go, but I'm keen to maybe, if possible, come back and listen to the rest of the contributions as well.
Thank you so much, Apsana, and thank you for all you do on behalf of constituents here on the Education Committee and speaking up for children and education. Thank you very much, and thanks for taking the time to join us. Well, I'm going to squeeze in another speaker, Jenny Jones, from another teacher from the Support for Learning Service, wants to talk very quickly about the service that she's involved in and what's being done to that. Jenny, are you there?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yep. Hello, so I work with my colleagues for the SBLD team, dyslexia team. We also work closely with the language and communication team, and both of our teams are under threat. From the SBLD team, it means that the actual direct work with children will stop. There will still be advice from the borough, but that actual going in to assess pupils, we might not always say that they could be dyslexic. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes there's other advice that needs to be said to schools, but that will go. As the parents said, we tend to work with children without EHCPs, that level of children whose needs will get overlooked, and they can have co-occurring difficulties. Sometimes their main need is autism or even sensory impairment. They have co-occurring needs, but they could have dyslexia as well that is not being tracked by the school. We have excellent teachers in Tower Hamlets schools, very able to teach literacy, but dyslexia, SBLD, is a specialism. Once my team goes, they will be gone. And there has been a significant amount of training of the staff that I work with, and that cannot be replaced. The co-occurring difficulties we work with as well, and I'll just leave you with one thought. We all know about prisons. We all know the percentage of the people in prisons where there is dyslexia involved. And this is not the time to be cutting direct work with pupils who may have this disability.
Thanks, Jenny. I think that's a really important contribution, that the wealth of experience and the years of expertise that we're going to lose if these cuts go ahead has been underlined there. We sometimes hear the expression that people know the price of everything and the value of nothing, and I feel that that's what we're seeing in the way these cuts are being proposed. So we're nearly at the end. We've just got a few more people to make some short contributions. Back to the influencers, as I've called them. I'd like to introduce Colleen Johnson, who is a member of the executive of the National Education Union, and she represents disabled members on that on our national executive, and is very interested in, obviously does a lot of work around supporting not just members but children with disabilities. Colleen, are you here?
I'm here.
Hello.
Hello. Yes, I had to log back out and log back in. I had a few tech difficulties. Thank you so much for inviting me this evening, Alex, and everybody else on the call. Just to say that I want to say a few words about looking at this whole issue through the lens of the pandemic, and also looking at it through the lens of the recent history of SEND funding. So please bear with me. We know now that the pandemic affected disabled people disproportionately, with over 2/3 of the COVID deaths relating to disabilities or long-term medical health conditions. We also know that SEND youngsters were very affected by the pandemic also. Modifications were made to the Children's and Families Act of 2014, which temporarily modified the duty of local authorities to secure provision for children with EHC plans to a duty of reasonable endeavour to do so. That's really important. That's one of the things the Coronavirus Act did. They could change other acts with it, and it's recently been renewed, the Coronavirus Act, and so it changed this ability to respond to EHC plans to only a duty of reasonable endeavour. So in addition, changes to the Special Education and Disabilities regulations temporarily amended the statutory timelines of the EHC needs assessment and plan process. That means all the timelines were changed, were suspended. So many children waiting for SEND assessments in order to assess support were waiting so that for their assessment, so they could get that support in order that they could fully engage and successfully take part in education. So everybody was held in this waiting stage. A further group with EHC plans are awaiting placement at more appropriate provision for their needs. Such pupils may not be able to access mainstream education, but do not yet have a place in another provision. And this, of course, affects pupils' mental health, which causes further issues. And the stats show a growing number of SEND children not in school. Now, that was a huge worry to me previously, and obviously these cuts in your borough as well wouldn't help that whole situation at all. These are things to quote when you are going with the argument. Blended learning, lots of SEND children are not able to access online learning platforms. They weren't able to during the lockdown. They were easily left out and forgotten about. A recent survey showed that only 6.5% of respondents said that their online learning platform was fully accessible and adapted for SEND pupils. So we know that the pandemic has caused all of these things. The transitions going back to school being difficult for some pupils, coming out of school difficult again, the whole thing tricky for educators and families, of course, to handle. Schools actually need more funding. SEND pupils need more funding for adaptive technology to help with some of this stuff. And the DFE and the government need to work closer with the local authority SEND services to access therapy and services so they can continue in this really difficult period that we're in. School staff need to support by adding captions, etc. And places like the organisations like the Oak Academy have only recently done this. So that's a big issue of captions. SEND staff are absolutely crucial. They play a pivotal role for children and their families, and they need to be supported with full PPE. We have issues where some of our members are not, given the correct kit. Every week I work with a teacher of the visually impaired for Oscar. They do great work, prepping all his work on the Brailler, supporting work done with the Braille notebook, supporting his safe mobility around the playground. It's fantastic to see. I'm absolutely knocked out by the skill of these people. A teacher for the deaf has obviously supported Lucas, because as Alison said in one of the very first speeches, these children are supported really early on, and their families from the earliest stages regards technology and many, many other things. These people are crucial. You are right. Fight like anything to keep them, because what you need is them and even better. So you've got my support completely. Good luck.
Thank you, Colleen. A few people have asked you for your notes there, so if you could email them to me, we'll get them out to people. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us and giving that national perspective. Right, we're going to finish off, and we're going to ask people to be quick fire and see if they can do it in less than a minute. We've got some councillors here, not enough maybe. We invited all the councillors from Tower Hamlets to attend the meeting, but we have got some. And first of all, I'm going to invite a councillor who's not from Tower Hamlets, but part of a national councillors network, if he's still here. Mr. James McCash.
Hello. Yes.
There you are.
I am still
He's
here.
a councillor in Southwark.
Yes, councillor in Southwark, and I'm also a teacher in Brixton. I'll be brief, and I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me to speak to your campaign today. It's really been an absolutely fantastic event. I absolutely loved Raymond's poetry. It was so inspirational to hear Iqbal and Sami and speaking about their experiences. And I hope that, I know it's been recorded, and I hope that the council see this as well, because listening to the discussion today, I just don't think they know what they're doing. I don't think they understand the damage that they're causing. You know, like for my sins, I'm the chair of the audit committee, so I spend a lot of time looking at council finances for my own council, and I understand the strains on budgets. I understand particularly the difficulty with the high needs budget. But I'm also, you know, I'm a teacher, and where I am a teacher, we rely on the SEN service, and I know that is not the place where savings are available. It's just simply not. Like, councils do need to balance the budget, but there has to be a better way than this. And I mean, frankly, I can't imagine many ways it'd be much worse. You know, you need to find savings. We're not on the back of children with disabilities. So I, as a teacher and a councillor, I offer you my complete support, solidarity, my admiration. I think you've got a lot to be proud of in this campaign. I think you'll win, and I hope you do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. Thanks for joining us with that message. In the chat, people are asking, will the video, we've recorded this meeting and we'll load the video up onto YouTube so we can send out the link and you can share it with people, and we will be sending it to councillors. Now, we have got some Tower Hamlets councillors here. Does any of them want to speak? Quickly, we're going to ask you to do a minute if you can.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Councillor Paramir. It's been quite powerful hearing this. You read about it, but actually hearing the testimonies is really powerful, especially testimonies of parents like Annika and Justin, as well as hearing from Iqbal and Sami as well, local students who benefited from the service. So there's a lot to take in. I'm here first and foremost as a parent as well, and I also work in the criminal justice system, and I do see the effects of children, the effects of public people being left behind by public institutions and the damage it does. And it's the criminal justice system that picks it up on a daily basis. I see that. So I'm happy to work with the campaigners. I think the campaign's got everything to win, and I'm glad that Afsana is here and the support of her office. So I'm happy to take the lead, follow the lead provided by Afsana and her office. So my email and my communication is always open. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peru. Gabriella?
I'll just be a minute. I think Tarek might also be on the line.
Yeah.
And I just want to say that thank you for bringing everyone together. I think it's a real testament to the work that has been going on for the last 20 or so years, that we have so many people that really want to speak out about what the service means, and it will be a loss. It's a huge cut really to schools, to families, to the support that that is given to teachers, and we know that SEND and children and their families have been disproportionately affected by lockdown. I think it's at this moment when we're in a pandemic that we really need to be starting to consider actually the impact, the long-term impact of what these services, loss of these services will mean. And I think it's right that we be asking for more investment, not less. I think this is really one part of what should be going out there. You know, the Labour Mayor for Greater Manchester, on hearing about the tier-3 COVID restrictions, you know, blasted the government and said we need, you know, we need more investment. And I think this is what we should be doing on the eve of hearing really what this will mean to people. And I therefore, I think one of the things that we should be offering as councillors is that Alex will work closely with the NEU, and we'll make sure that other councillors understand what's going on. We'll make sure that people's voices are heard within this process, and we'll definitely make sure that if we have to go to a consultation process, that we'll support you throughout that whole process. So I hope that Tarek's still on the line, because I know that 7 o'clock was the end time, but if so, perhaps Tarek could say one or two words too.
Tarek, are you here?
Yes, Alex, I'm here. So yeah, it's so good to see so many people here, and thanks, Alex, for inviting me. I think Alex used to be my secondary school teacher in Stepney Green. So when he invites us, we've got to attend. So it's actually really moving to hear so many stories, especially from the parents who've struggled. I know Justine and Iqbal are still here. It's good to hear about people like Iqbal who've actually become successful with the support of teachers in Tower Hamlets. And we need to, as Gabriella says, invest more in these services, these unique services which sort of many families rely on. I've got so many family members, my own nephews and nieces, who have gone through this sort of services and have had the support. With sort of Gabriella and all the other councillors who are here and others that are not, we will sort of support this campaign and stand with you all to make sure that this does not go through or help as much as we can. I sort of been sort of looking at this over the last 2 weeks and been researching this through and through, and obviously there's a huge issue with the sort of government cuts, especially on this, but I think locally we can be a lot more creative about how we do things, and especially how we do cuts or changes of services on SLS and saves everything on these. So we should be able to do better if we work together and make sure sort of we stand together as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tarek. Thank you, Tarek, Gabrielle and Peru for attending, and we will be providing briefings for councillors. So we're going to finish here. I don't think I need to add any more to what people have said, except to say to all the contributions, except to say that we are determined to fight these cuts. For some of our members, as I said, they face losing their jobs or they face having their pay cut. That's important to us and that's important to them. But what's important about this meeting is that it's about children and it's about our most vulnerable children. And that's why we're really determined to fight these cuts. And with your help and with your support and by you talking to other people, we think we can stop these cuts. The consultation starts, the public consultation starts 2nd of November and runs until Christmas. So we want you to join that consultation, talk to councillors, make responses, attend the meetings. We'll put up notices about when the meetings are and sign out our petition. Thank you to all our speakers tonight. Thank you particularly to Rachel Smith, who's done a bit of overtime. Rachel, thank you so much for providing the interpretation for us. And thanks also to Amanda Bentham, Alison Wagner and Lorna Handley, Lorna Patterson, who've put together this meeting and contacted all the speakers and put together what I think is a meeting I'm particularly proud of. I think it's been one of the best meetings we've held on any single issue. So thank you all. Please do join our fight, support the campaign, and let's fight these cuts and turn them back. Thank you very, very much for attending.